So we're looking at the gospel today, and this is where Jesus announces that Judas is going to betray him. It's a fascinating account because, as we know, the other apostles don't know this. And that's why Jesus announced it. Now, how does Jesus find out? Now, obviously, we can say it's through a mystical, he's divine and he's human, and maybe from his prayer, the Father spoke to him and told him that, yes, Judas is going to betray him, or any other sources of information. But he also may have had some inside information. Someone could have come to him and say, better watch out for Judas. You don't know. But in any case, we do know that he announced that one of his 12 chosen was going to betray him. And he announces that. So he's doing two things. He's telling all the others this is going to happen, and he is telling Judas that he knows. And now Judas is kind of caught in the middle, and he goes out and he is going, actually we're going to see that tomorrow, to betray Jesus. But one of the questions we can ask ourselves is, why would he do that? And we know, we talked about this earlier, we talked about this yesterday. Judas was known as a thief. He really hadn't been sold into the whole message of Jesus. And the other part of this is, remember, it was his expectation that Jesus was going to free Judah from the Romans. So he followed Jesus with the expectation that Judah would become a sovereign nation again, and eventually you'd have Israel and Judah united again, and you'd have one country of Israel, which ultimately does happen in 1948. But Judas is all focused on, he wants things to happen his way. And that's where he betrays Jesus. And that's an important distinction to understand that. He betrays Jesus because he comes to realize that Jesus is not going to overthrow the Romans. He's not going to put together a bunch of soldiers to overthrow the Romans. And that's who... and he realizes that Jesus has a completely different message. It would be like if you were seeking someone to be the great leader to change your nation, and the person who comes in is a nonviolent person who preaches about prayer, and you'd say, well, how is he going to change our nation? And what Judas didn't realize, and this, actually no one does, this is a reality that is shown over and over and over and over again in the Gospels across many lines, is that everyone was focused too small. Now, part of the reason why they were focused too small is because they didn't have any other understanding, right? But they were focused too small. Best example of that is the raising of Lazarus. What was it that they wanted Jesus to do? To come in and to heal Lazarus of his sickness. What happens? Lazarus dies, and then he's raised from the dead. That was, as the saying goes, that was not on their bingo card. They had no concept that was going to happen, because the message was, if Lazarus dies, that's the end, period. And Jesus is changing the focus. Now, one of the important things to keep in mind is, what is Jesus' real message, which we cannot fully understand until the resurrection. And this is something Jesus says all along. You see that in the Gospels all along. What is the real message? We are more than we assume we are. If your focus is just on this life, and that's it, and this is one of the issues with, this is what the atheists believe. And I'm not attacking atheists. Don't ever assume that I'd be doing that. I'm just explaining this is their belief, that this is it. That's all there is. And therefore, when you die, there's nothing else. Whereas, what is Jesus constantly focusing the people on? To have a better understanding of who you are, and you are rooted in God, who is the source of all being, and your existence is bigger than it appears. And of course, we ultimately understand eternal life. That's the message. And this is something that Jesus is always saying. Don't be focused on this world. Focus, and don't be focused just on the next world either. That's called angelism, and that's a heresy. And it's there's an expression they used to say in the charismatic renewal: they're heavenly minded but no earthly good. That's angelism. That's what happens. We're focused on, they're so focused on getting to heaven. Some person in front of them is is starving to death, and they just ignore them completely because they're focused on getting to heaven. They're heavenly minded, but no earthly good. So you want to have the proper focus on this world, and you want to have the proper focus on eternal life. And that's where this whole message is going to change. Judas is focused just on this world. He's thinking strictly politically. And he may be thinking, as we saw, that the other apostles asked Jesus earlier, he may be thinking specifically of having a major role, maybe in charge of the treasury of the new kingdom. We know that he was already in charge of the treasury. So maybe he'd be focused on, I'll be the new treasurer of the new kingdom. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And he's focused there, and then realized none of this is going to happen. And that's where his focus is, because he doesn't fully understand who Jesus is. That's why, and how is it that you come to a deeper understanding of who Jesus is? Go back to your traditional Catholic teaching. And I'm not talking Baltimore Catechism. I'm talking, just basic Catholic teaching. What is the mother of all virtues? Humility. What is the mother of all sins? Pride. Think of the two as a door. The mother of all sins is pride. The door is closed until Jesus meets my expectations. That's Judas. The door is open, and I will accept Jesus however he is. That's humility. And that's the other apostles. They're confused. They're like, people will say, well, your door is open there. Anything could come in. Yes, but I'm trusting in the Lord. That's humility, you see. And this is something that Judas couldn't do. The door was closed until Jesus met his expectations. And when he came to understand that Jesus was not going to meet his expectations, he decided that he followed the wrong person and decided to betray him. Maybe another way to put it, and this is all speculation at this, but this is not what I just said, but what I'm about to say is speculation. Maybe he came to realize eventually that the authorities were going to catch up to Jesus, and when they did, they would hang all or crucify all the apostles, including Judas. And he figured, why don't I make the deal now before tragedy happens? So you see that radical difference. You see what's going on. He hasn't fully come to accept Jesus as he is. But don't ever forget something else about Judas, and this comes out of Catholic teaching too, and St. Jerome teaches this as well. He said, as a matter of fact, the saying he says exactly, part of it is, you remember Peter, but don't also forget Judas. Both of them were bishops, what we would call today bishops, because both of them were apostles. The bishops are the descendants of the apostles. So that's why, you keep that in mind. Now, I'm not attacking bishops. I'm just saying that's what St. Jerome said. Well, the other thing to keep in mind is Judas did miracles just like all the other apostles did miracles. He healed people, he raised the dead, he drove out demons. And one of the teachings that you'll find from the church is someone who does miracles. People say, well, they don't believe in God, yet they're doing miracles. What does that mean? Or they're not Catholic, they're doing miracles. The church teaches that there are these charisms, And I'm not attacking the charismatic renewal, but it's a good point to understand. There are these charisms where people have these special gifts and they can do powerful miracle things. God works these miracles through them, but it says nothing about their holiness. So someone is, raising people from the dead. Well, let's get something a little bit more obvious. Someone is healing someone of illness. Does that mean that person is by default holy? Church teaching from the Council of Trent says no. They're two totally separate things. So you want to keep that in mind. Yes, someone who is a grave sinner can heal people in the name of Christ, but that doesn't mean that they are by default saints. Right? And so Judas is that exact description. He doesn't accept Jesus. He ends up betraying Jesus, but while he was operating as an apostle, he had all the powers that all the other apostles have. So keep that in mind. And that's why we want to be rooted in what Jesus has to offer us. And that means we keep our expectations open. We don't want Jesus to fit our expectations because that's what Judas did. We're going to be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast, where just subscribe, like, comment. We'll be back right after this. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. So sometime in the middle of the month, it was actually around mid-March. Well, that's what I just said, but in any case, representatives of the International Association of Exorcists met with Pope Leo XIV. And, when I heard this story, obviously I agree with the meeting with the Pope and the whole. You don't even have to even assume I wouldn't agree with that. But I knew that the secular media would pick up on it, and not understanding the little nuances, they would run with it. And then obviously you'd have this whole focus on people who I disagree with, which are the online exorcists, the celebrity exorcists we see on YouTube and other places. Because, you see, I shouldn't say they claim to be true exorcists, so I'll leave it at that. But an exorcist does not want to promote himself as an exorcist normally, and some do. Okay, that happens. But you want to be careful of that because you become a target for the devil. This stuff is real. The whole exorcism and the reason for exorcism, demonic and all that, that's all real. We know that. But what happens is people get focused on it if they don't have a good understanding. Now, one of the things that came out of this is they explained a problem is, remember, this is worldwide. So this isn't focused on just maybe, what we see in the United States. This is worldwide. And one of the things they said is that they're growing because of links to occult sex, SECTS, esoteric practices, and Satanism. Well, okay. There you go. Those will lead you into spiritual harm. No questions asked. But is it hard to figure that out? Remember, all of those are against the first commandment. So you want to understand that. Anytime you do anything against the first commandment, that's always going to be trouble. For example, it says, beware of Satanism. Well, there is a satanic temple in Salem. I haven't been in Salem in a while, Salem, Massachusetts. It's not hard to figure out which of those buildings is the satanic temple. So if you're serious about your faith and you don't, and you reject Satanism, then you're not going to walk into the satanic temple by accident. It's pretty obvious which one is, at least the last time I was up in Salem. And that becomes an issue because there are people that will tell you, keep away from Salem, Massachusetts. Okay, but there's also Catholic parishes and a Catholic shrine established by the Archdiocese of Boston. So if you say keep away from Salem, Massachusetts, that imply everything in Salem is satanic, which is an absolute ridiculous statement. Now, not saying that anyone said that, but you see what I'm saying. Don't go to Salem, Massachusetts. No, I mean, obviously, I live here in Massachusetts. I'm not going to tell someone don't go to Salem, but I am going to tell someone that, maybe where the Catholic sites are, and don't focus on any of the whole aspects of Salem. Salem is known, I don't know if it's formally or informally, as the Witches' City. A lot more to Salem than witches. I'll tell you that right now. And anyone in Salem will tell you that because they don't always like the whole concept of the Witches' City. Some people absolutely don't like it at all. So, and that's the whole thing. You get focused, stay away from whatever. And you have to be careful because what you're teaching people is to focus on the demonic, to keep away from the demonic. It's like, whatever you do, well, here's a good example. Whatever you do, don't walk down that street. Well, out of all the streets in the city, which one are you going to be focused on? The one you're not supposed to walk down. You see what I'm saying? So I get real frustrated with that. But notice what the Exorcist they said, occult practices. Keep away from, basically what I'm telling you based on what they said. Occult practices, very easy to do. Don't play with Ouija boards. And here's the one that's the hardest one for me to tell people. Don't claim an astrological sign. Don't claim one. People say, well, everyone has an astrological sign. And I always tell people, that's like telling me that I have a connection to Hinduism. I don't have any connection to Hinduism. So you see what I'm saying? Don't what's your astrological sign? Everyone has one. No, they don't. The overnight host of The Other Side of Midnight weeknights over on WABC. That's not an endorsement. It's not a paid plug. It's a program I listen to if I'm awake at that time. You wake and go to sleep, awake and go to sleep. The Other Side of Midnight on WABC with a host by the name of Lionel. And when people ask him what his astrological sign is, he says, mine is feces. If you listen to his show, that's what he'll tell you. So any kind of the occult practices, just keep away from them. Why? Because what are occult practices all about? They're all about a form of idolatry. You're looking for information or safety or protection from a non-divine source. That's what you're doing. Esoteric practices are described as special mythical practices that are only done with a special group. Another word for that is Gnosticism. Again, all these are rooted in being focused on other gods. And that is always going to open you up to the demonic. Always. So don't do that. And that's one of the things that I tell people. Now, people who know me know that I listen to Coast to Coast AM every single morning. I listen to the podcast. But I won't listen to anything occult. Absolutely not. I said, well, today we're going to be talking with occult. Okay. But they have a whole bunch of other shows. They were talking, a show I was listening to this morning was talking about Mars exploration. So, the great shows other than that. But I won't, if it's got, something to do with the occult, spiritualism and all the other stuff, well, I won't listen to that show. So that's what I do. But that's the whole thing. And this is why I get frustrated with some of these stories, because the secular media does not have a clue. Many members of the secular media just don't understand all this, and many reject religion altogether, and because of that, they don't know how to report on it. And so you'll have all these reports of, the whole bit, where it's really simple. How do you avoid demonic oppression or influence? Stay away from the demonic and those things that are connected to the demonic. And what's the best way to do that is keep away from any form of idolatry. Really simple. Absolutely simple. And if you do get involved in that, how do you fix it? You go to confession. This is one of the things. Now, one of the other recommendations is that every diocese needs its own exorcist. That's true. Everyone's supposed to have an exorcist. We have one here in Boston. Every diocese is supposed to have its own exorcist, and they should be well trained. That's true too. And I'll tell you, you want information? Go to your diocesan exorcist, and you're not going to find him, for the most case, there are a few exceptions, on YouTube. So something to keep in mind, good things to know, and we'll be right back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. The other thing I wanted to mention in regards to the whole issue with exorcists, remember something. Stay rooted in the Lord in prayer and stay close to the sacraments. And, when you hear these stories, they said there's a greater amount of demonic activity, be aware of that, but don't get focused on it, because you need to focus on Christ. Remember, the reason why I don't like these online exorcists is they have a tendency to get people focused on the demonic, not on purpose, but where you're going to be focused. If they talk about the devil, you're going to be focused on the demonic. And, if I do this, I'm going to end up in hell. Forget that. If I do this, Jesus is leading me into eternal life. That's where you need to be focused and be rooted in prayer, close to the sacraments, and all that. Tomorrow we're going to be on Spy Wednesday, and that's the famous day where Judas betrays Jesus. Let's take a look at that tomorrow. Have a blessed day.
Yeah, the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance. Word up. Word up. Word up.
The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.